and
On the night of the 11th of February, 2012, Beverly Hills was still brightly lit like any other weekend evening. In front of the lobby of the Beverly Hilton Hotel, cars lined up one after another, greetings echoing steadily. A pre-Grammy party was being prepared, a place where the American music industry gathered ahead of the biggest awards night of the year. But at the same time, on a higher floor, behind a closed door, the story was moving in a completely different direction. Whitney Houston was not in the party lobby, not standing in front of an audience hall, not appearing under the lights. She was in room 434 of the Beverly Hilton, a quiet hotel room where there was no stage, only the even, cold light of the late afternoon. To the outside world, Whitney Houston was still an American music icon, a name associated with hit songs that had dominated radio and television for decades. But in those final hours, she was simply a woman in a private space, separated from the rhythm of life unfolding just below. Whitney Houston's death is often mentioned through brief pieces of information: time, location, official conclusion. But last moments do not exist in news bulletins. They exist in very ordinary details: shortened schedules, unfinished meetings, the feeling that everything is still in time until it is no longer. Why did a voice that once represented perfection on the American stage end in such silence, just a few hours before an evening when she should still have appeared, even if only as a guest? This story is not only about a final moment. It is about the path that led to that moment, about how fame operates, about comebacks burdened with excessive expectations, and about the isolation that can exist even when someone is at the center of attention. When looking back from room 434, glamour and darkness are no longer separate. They overlap, quietly. This is the story of Whitney Houston in her final hours. Not to judge, but to understand. And as we slow down each point in time of that night, the question remains: what truly happened behind the door of room 434, while the entire United States was preparing for a night of music? On the Farewell Aussie Stars channel, we look back at the final moments of legends who shaped popular culture, and trace what was overlooked behind the spotlight. If you are interested in stories like these, stay with the channel as we begin to slow down the final hours of Whitney Houston. News of Whitney Houston's passing spread in a way reserved only for national icons. Not as scattered rumors later confirmed, but as a collective pause. On that same afternoon in Beverly Hills, while preparations for the pre-Grammy party were still underway in the Beverly Hilton lobby below, phone calls began to change tone. Some people left makeup rooms earlier than planned. Others stood still in front of their phone screens. And then, a sentence appeared on many lips at once, like something hard to believe. Whitney Houston was gone. The shock of the story lay in contrast. Whitney did not pass away on stage, not on tour, not amid cheers. She passed away in a hotel, the very place where the music industry was gathering to celebrate a night of honor. An America accustomed to hearing her voice in supermarkets, in cars, on the radio, at weddings and during holiday seasons, suddenly had to face a very specific absence. That name would no longer appear in the present tense. It shifted into the past within just a few hours. That is also why the story did not end with grief. It immediately raised questions. How did a voice once considered the standard of an entire era live through her final years? Who was the last person to see her on that day? How did the final hours at the Beverly Hilton unfold? And why, despite an official conclusion, did the public still feel that there was another layer left unspoken? Not to fabricate a story, but because everything happened so close to the lights, so close to other people, yet so isolated. In many celebrity deaths, the media can separate the story into two streams: private life and event. Here, those two streams collided at a single location. The Beverly Hilton became a strange symbol, one building containing both the laughter of a party and the silence of a closed room. Simply standing in front of the lift, one could see that boundary. And it was precisely that boundary that haunted people. A human life could change state that quickly, while around it there were still schedules, shows, and lights. The pre-Grammy party still took place, but the atmosphere could not remain the same. Side conversations changed topics. Hugs lasted longer. Silences grew. And for the general audience, the story shifted into another form. No longer Whitney of the past, but Whitney of the final days. From that moment, everything began to be replayed backwards. Recent appearances, signs people said they wish they had looked at more closely, fragments of a life the spotlight did not reach. And that is where this video begins its work. Not to collect rumors, not to script a tragedy, but to reposition the story along the axis of final hours. Context, timelines, small decisions, distances, and publicly verifiable facts. Because when an American icon leaves in this way, what people need is not only mourning, they need to understand why. And understanding requires slowing things down. Whitney Houston did not appear out of nothing. She was born into a family where music was a daily practice, not an ambition. Her mother, Sissy Houston, was a gospel singer respected within the professional community. Vocal rehearsals, church sessions, time spent behind the stage were not about creating a star, but about learning how to stand firmly behind a microphone. From a very early age, Whitney understood music as discipline, not just emotion. When she stepped into public view in the mid-1980s, she carried an almost perfect image. A powerful yet clean voice, precise technique, a bright face, a composed presence. America quickly embraced Whitney as a safe symbol, radio-friendly, family-friendly, suitable for major events. Her consecutive hits were not only commercial successes, but also shaped a new standard for mainstream pop and R&B. Whitney did not need to shock. She only needed to stand still and sing. But that very perfection also created a quiet pressure. When the public becomes accustomed to a consistently stable voice, even the smallest deviation is magnified. Every later appearance was compared not to others, but to her own past. Whitney gradually became trapped in the image America loved, while the real person behind the lights grew increasingly complex. Her marriage to Bobby Brown marked a clear turning point in how the media viewed her. From a clean icon, Whitney began appearing in personal headlines, backstage stories, and debates of right and wrong. Her career did not collapse immediately, but its trajectory changed. Music remained, but it was no longer the sole center. Public pressure, erratic schedules, and strained relationships gradually took over. In the years that followed, Whitney still had moments of return. Major stages, appearances that reminded audiences why they once loved this voice. But between them were long gaps. Delayed projects, incomplete performances. The media began using more cautious language, no longer speaking of peaks, but of hope. And when an artist is placed in a state of hope, it is often a sign that something has drifted from its original path. Viewed from the perspective of final hours, this period is not a side note. It is the slope leading into the final weeks. Not loud, not marked by a single breaking moment, but by the accumulation of pressure, expectation, and prolonged fatigue. This is how an icon is gradually pulled away from the central spotlight, entering a chapter few fully witnessed, until everything ended too quickly, in a hotel room. After her peak years, signs of instability did not appear all at once, but were scattered across time. At first, there were canceled appointments, unusually long recording sessions, tours adjusted at the last minute. Within professional circles, people said quietly that Whitney was no longer as stable as before. In the press, wording was chosen more carefully, but the tone had changed. Cautious, guarded. Whitney's greatest pressure came not only from the public, but from her own memory. Each time she stepped onto the stage, audiences did not hear the present Whitney, but the Whitney of 10 or 15 years earlier. That comparison was unfair, but almost unavoidable. When an artist is forced to compete with their own legend, every effort feels breathless. Whitney's private life gradually became a public topic. Family conflicts, incomplete interviews, visible moments of exhaustion eroded the image of the perfect icon. American media began asking more questions than offering praise, not because they wanted to expose faults, but because the change was too evident to ignore. In the late 2000s, each appearance carried two parallel emotions: hope and concern. Audiences wanted to believe in a comeback, but also recognized that her voice, physical condition, and mental state were no longer consistent. Some performances still touched old emotions, but long-term stability was gone. Close collaborators spoke of irregular schedules, of days when Whitney withdrew more from the outside world. Notably, Whitney did not completely disappear. She continued trying to stay connected to music, accepted interviews, appeared publicly when possible. But instead of controlling her own narrative, she was increasingly swept into the way others told it. An icon who once defined standards now lived within headlines she did not write. Viewed from the perspective of last moments, this was not a sudden collapse. It was a prolonged erosion, where each passing year took away a portion of energy and belief. And when she entered the final weeks, Whitney Houston was no longer a star protected by glamour, but a person trying to maintain balance between a glorious memory and a heavy reality. In the weeks before the night of 11 February 2012, Whitney Houston remained in a rhythm of life that outsiders might consider normal within the entertainment world. Los Angeles entered Grammy season. Meetings, pre-parties, and schedules spread across the city. Whitney appeared within that context as a name that still carried weight, even if no longer at the center. She no longer followed dense performance schedules, but she was still mentioned. And each time she was mentioned, the past followed the present. The Beverly Hilton was not an unfamiliar place to the music world. It was where very ordinary encounters took place. Hotel lobbies, lifts, corridors, suites. No stage was needed, only a familiar address people naturally gravitated toward. Whitney came there during Grammy Week as part of that shared atmosphere, where everyone talked about awards night while living through side meetings. Whitney's final days did not resemble a clear countdown. There was no official farewell statement, no announcement that she needed rest. Everything unfolded as if there was still plenty of time. A few more meetings, a few more calls, plans that could be rearranged. That sense of still in time is what makes the story chilling. Because in real life, tragedy rarely knocks loudly. It often enters through assumption. Public information shows that Whitney continued to be mentioned around pre-Grammy events. Some appearances caused both relief and concern. People wanted to see her well, but could also tell she was no longer as steady as in her peak years. For an artist like Whitney, being well meant more than presence. It meant meeting a standard. And that standard, she herself knew, had become the harshest measure. Then came 11th February. Outside, the Beverly Hilton was preparing for the party. Inside, Whitney moved at a different pace. The final hours were not a sequence of dramatic actions. They were a sequence of silences. Being in the room. The afternoon hotel air. Separation from a crowd just a few floors away. Being so close to the lights, yet outside them, is a feeling difficult to name. The fear of final hours lies here. In hindsight, people ask whether signs were missed, moments that could have changed direction. But at the time, for those around her, everything may still have seemed like another day of Whitney Houston. An imperfect day, but not yet understood as the last. 11 February 2012 passed at the Beverly Hilton in a manner familiar to a hotel entering Grammy peak. Morning and early afternoon showed no signs that this would be a day remembered for years to come. Whitney Houston remained in her suite, room 434, a private space separated from the lobby where people walked, talked, and prepared for evening events. According to later public information, Whitney spent most of her time in the room. No dense schedule, no press conference, no performance. Those around her still regarded it as a normal rest period before she was expected to attend the evening party with her team and friends in the music industry. For many, the silence was not unusual. By mid-afternoon, when Whitney did not respond as expected, her assistant entered the room. The following minutes moved faster than the normal perception of time. Security staff were called. Emergency assistance was provided on site within the enclosed space of the room. No audience, no cameras. Only those very close, facing an unforeseen situation. Medical personnel arrived at the Beverly Hilton shortly afterwards. Whitney Houston was confirmed deceased at the hotel in the afternoon of the 11th of February 2012. This information was not immediately released publicly. For a short period, it remained within the hotel's internal corridors, amid urgent calls and necessary decisions. The contrast of that moment is what makes the story of last moments especially heavy. Just a few floors below, the lobby remained brightly lit. Guests continued to arrive. Music was still being prepared for the Grammy party that evening. Meanwhile, in room 434, Whitney Houston's story had stopped. Not on stage, not in a final performance, but in a quiet room, a short distance from the lights. When the official confirmation was released and spread, the American entertainment world nearly froze for several hours. Evening plans entered a state of hesitation. Conversations shifted direction. Whitney Houston's name appeared everywhere, but this time not linked to music, but to a simple and very difficult question. What really happened in those final hours? Whitney's passing had no public farewell, no final image sent to the audience. Only a room, an afternoon in Los Angeles, and a silence that followed. From that moment, the story no longer belonged solely to her, but moved into another phase: investigation, controversy, and aftershock. After Whitney Houston passed away at the Beverly Hilton, the story immediately shifted into a different language. No longer music, no longer stage, but official procedures, unanswered questions, and immense media pressure covering every small detail. For a celebrity of Whitney's stature, the world did not tolerate ambiguity for long. And therefore, the hours that followed were not only about mourning, but also verification. Authorities proceeded according to protocol. Foundational information was released: location, time, general circumstances. Then came the official conclusion regarding the cause of death, stating that Whitney Houston passed due to a drowning-related incident, with contributing factors of heart disease and the effects of substance use. This was the part that left the public simultaneously wanting to believe they understood, yet feeling the story was not fully closed. Because a medical conclusion may be accurate, but it does not answer the feeling of how did it reach this point. The greatest controversy was not denial of the conclusion, but the layer of questions surrounding context. Why did a symbol once named by America as a standard end in such fragility? Why did her final years feel simultaneously like returning and leaving? And in an industry where people are always around, why did so many critical moments unfold in isolation? Aftershocks spread in multiple directions. Within the music world, colleagues spoke of her voice and memories, but could not hide their regret over a heavy final chapter. For the general public, the story quickly became a form of collective recollection. Everyone remembered where they heard the news, when it happened, and how long disbelief lasted. American media, which had followed Whitney closely for years, immediately reconstructed the entire context. Recent appearances, signs they believed had existed earlier, relationships, professional and personal pressures. Alongside this emerged a parallel narrative: theories, speculation, amplified suspicious points. But what mattered was separation. Some elements were public facts, already concluded. Others were simply the public's dissatisfaction with seeing such a large life end so quietly. In Final Hours, tragedy does not require speculation. Tragedy lies plainly in the truth. A voice that once represented light in American popular culture reached a point where health and life could no longer endure. The Grammy night proceeded immediately after, with a very different atmosphere. Tributes appeared, not monument building, but acknowledgement that a chapter had closed right in front of them. And outside, millions of viewers watched old performances, then asked themselves, if the final years had been slowed down, was there something that should have been seen differently? From that moment, Whitney Houston's story became an uncomfortable lesson about fame. Fame can lift someone very high, but it can also hold them in an old image for too long, until every attempt at recovery is examined under magnification. And when recovery does not unfold as the public hopes, it becomes easy to forget that behind the icon is still a human being. When the noise gradually faded, what remained was not controversy or striking headlines, but a familiar sound that had existed in many people's lives. Whitney Houston's voice needs no context to be recognized. It plays on the radio, on old cassette tapes, at ceremonies, in private moments across generations. And it is there that her legacy endures most strongly. Whitney was not only a successful singer. For many years, she was a standard, a voice that forced an entire industry to recalibrate how it understood technique, emotion, and delivery. Her recordings became benchmarks, not because they were perfect, but because they carried a rare certainty, as if the person behind the microphone knew exactly where she was and what she was doing. Viewed from her final hours, Whitney Houston's story takes on a different tone. It is no longer merely the journey of a star in decline, but the journey of a person who carried too much expectation for too long. The stage lights did not disappear suddenly. They dimmed gradually, alongside health, privacy, and the ability to live outside a public image. For family and those closest to her, that legacy is more personal. It lives in familiar objects, old habits, unfillable absences. For colleagues, it is a quiet reminder that talent is not immune to harm. And for audiences, Whitney Houston becomes a collective memory, a voice tied to a time when they believed beautiful things could last forever. Within the framework of last moments, final hours, this story does not end in room 434 of the Beverly Hilton. It continues in how we look back on final years, in questioning how a society treats its icons, and in acknowledging that sometimes what is most needed is not a grand comeback, but peace arriving sooner. If you are interested in stories behind the spotlight, final hours that changed how we view legends, follow the channel to continue journeys like this.
And if we